Now, the Conservative MP, Sir Charles Walker, has expressed concern at what he called the disgraceful and un-British police officers who bundled an elderly woman into the back of a van for protesting outside Parliament. This is the former chair of the 1922 committee, told the officers that their actions were an outrage as he happened to be walking past the incident yesterday afternoon. It's believed the 72-year-old woman was participating in either an anti-lockdown protest or an anti-vaccine demonstration. Sir Charles then appeared in the Commons later to demand that the Prime Minister come down to sort this out. Have a listen.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I have just witnessed an elderly lady peacefully protesting with a handful of other people be arrested and carried spread eagle to a police van just outside the precinct of the House of Commons. This is a disgrace. This is un-British. It is unconstitutional. And this government, our Prime Minister, needs to end these injustices now. Madam Deputy Speaker, will you bring the Prime Minister and or the Home Secretary here today to sort this out? She was an old lady robbed of her dignity for having the courage to protest about having her fundamental rights and those of my constituents and others removed.
Well, one of the most passionate speeches in the House of Commons I've heard for a long time. Sir Charles Walker is with us now. Sir Charles, afternoon to you. And I, despite a day on now, I'm assuming you still feel as passionately as you did yesterday about this.
Yeah, I do. And it is a ridiculous law that banned protesting. It's not for governments to ban protesting. The right to protest does not belong to government. It belongs to us. It is a ridiculous law that Parliament passed. It should never have passed this law. And we've put police officers in a very, very difficult situation. So actually, that's why I demanded the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary come to Parliament, because they're the ones who can change the law. They can say, actually, we got this wrong, and we're going to change it. And they should change it, and I hope that they do, because it is un-British. We don't go around arresting people for peaceful protests, and whatever the situation is. And it is unbelievable that we did this as a Parliament.
You just happened to, of course, to be walking past when this was happening.
No, I didn't. No.
You went out, did you, to see what they were protesting about?
I was watching it from a window, and there was this old lady by the railing.
Okay.
She was talking to the police, and a police van turned up and I said, "Oh my Lord," to a colleague, "they're going to arrest this old woman." Then I went down, and by that stage she was being carried off.
Was she? I mean, I'm just trying to imagine what else might have been going on, Charles. I mean, is it possible that she was asked to move on and didn't, and then after
she was asked to move on? She's 72 years old, though. She's asked to move on. She was having a little peaceful protest, a handful of people having a peaceful protest. They were posing no risk to anyone whatsoever.
So why her and not the others?
I believe that my government has introduced such a restrictive and repressive law.
Well, I understand you can protest as long as you've got all your right ducks in a row, isn't that right?
Yeah, which is basically banning protests. You've got to fill out forms. Nobody should have to fill out a form. You want to have a protest today, get on the street and have a protest.
Yeah, we've got a pandemic going on, though, Charles. That's the problem, isn't it? That's the reason for this emergency legislation, as we mentioned, because of what's happening to our country and the world.
I mean, this is sort of the standard catch-all rubbish. You cast your mind back to May and June, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people packed onto Bournemouth Beach. Not a single case attributed to that. So how on earth is a handful of people, a dozen people, 24 people, pottering around on the streets of London or some market town in the Shires pose any health risk whatsoever? We've got to stop buying this nonsense. It is utter nonsense.
So, what about her fellow protesters? I mean, as I understand, she was the only one arrested. I assume there was a reason for that.
More may have been arrested.
Okay, but was there a specific... What was she arrested for? Because they usually have to
She was arrested for breaking the coronavirus protests regulation. So She was having an illegal protest. So she was That's what she was arrested
So
for.
she was asked to move on. I mean, I'm kind of with you on this, Charles, in terms of the India. I'm just trying to work out what was going on in the minds of the police.
What I think happened, because I got a briefing from a minister. What happened is there were about 20 people having a protest. I think this is what happened. This is what was relayed back to me. 20 people having a protest. I'm not really interested in what they were protesting about. Perfectly entitled to have a protest. They were approached, told that that they were outside the law doing it, move on. I understand a few moved on. A few didn't want to move on, so they were asked to provide their name and address so they could receive a fixed penalty notice. They said they had no intention of providing their name and address. They were having a peaceful protest. So I understand that at that point two were arrested. The others drifted off. Then I understand this lady and another friend or protester decided to have another little mini protest, the two of them, opposite Westminster Tube Station, and they decided that they still wanted to continue that little protest, and so she was going to be given a penalty notice, and she refused to give her name and address, so she was arrested. It does seem slightly over the top, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. It seems incredibly over the top. I guess the Prime Minister, I'm assuming, or the Home Secretary, didn't come down to meet you and see what was going on?
I have had a conversation with the Home Secretary.
What did she say?
And I think, and I don't want to give away what the conversation was, I think there is a huge appreciation that we have put the police, who, by the way, I've got a huge amount of time for, and that's why I find this so distressing, because these are people I really admire and respect. The police have been put in an almost impossible position by members of Parliament, by this law. They're having to do things that actually many people, not all, but many people find very distressing. And the people who find it very distressing are the people who are normally the greatest allies of the police, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But I get, I appreciate you had a confidential conversation with the Home Secretary. But, I mean, how sympathetic can she be, bearing in mind it's her department ultimately responsible for the very law that you have a problem with?
Well, sympathy butters no bread. I don't want sympathy. What I want is a realisation that this is a nonsense law, and that we need to repeal it as soon as possible.
I would have thought you'd have given Priti Patel both barrels on this one, Charles. I mean, it's her name on the tin, right?
Do you know what? You can spend all your time, and you can tell I'm still irritated by it. You can spend a lot of time being angry, and right now I'm a very angry person, as I'm sure your listeners can tell. But actually, what I want is I just want the law changed, and that's what I want. You can't take back what happened yesterday, but you've sort of got to make sure it doesn't happen tomorrow or this coming weekend, because there are these little protests all around the country of people saying, hold on a second, my fundamental rights are important to me, I don't like what's being done, and I want to protest about it. And the fact of the matter is, some people have got in touch with me and said, how dare you use your position as a member of Parliament to stand up in the chamber and berate people? Well, who else can do it now? Because if you try and do it in the streets, you get arrested. Who else? The only people now who can protest left in the country publicly are members of Parliament.
So in terms of changing the law, I mean, let's be realistic. I think a lot of people, Charles, would listen to this and say, yep, I'd sign up to change the law. It's not going to happen, though, is it? There's a sense
Could
now.
do next Tuesday.
Do you think so?
They're bringing in the new regulations coming out of the December 2nd lockdown. Yeah, so they're bringing in the new regulations, and what I really hope, is that the new regulations specifically acknowledge that the right to protest fundamentally belongs to us when we're born and doesn't belong to government to withdraw when it feels like it. No matter what the challenge, it doesn't belong to government, it belongs to us, and the government should just back off.
Are you confident this change in the law could happen?
I'm hopeful. That's less than confident, isn't it?
Have you heard from the lady, by the way, who got arrested? She was obviously released. Any news there?
No, I haven't. And, it's perfect. Look, you just see something and you think it's not right. We just don't do this in this country. We shouldn't be doing it. And, this should be worrying members of Parliament. It's not how we want to see our constituents policed. It's not how we want to treat the police by putting them in this ridiculous situation. I'm sure that there's many police officers that find this utterly abhorrent.
Yep.
And we need to start clearing up this mess. And we're responsible for it. Let me be clear. We're responsible for it, us as members of parliament, yeah? We're acting like managers and not representatives. You have to weigh up. You have to weigh up difficult decisions. And we've gone hell for leather, locking everything down, shutting everything up, restricting freedoms, introducing laws that we can't even keep up with. We've introduced so many without really pausing to think what the consequences could be. And you can only police in this country with the consent of the people. And there's a lot of people who normally have huge admiration and love for the police who are now beginning to feel, hold on a second, perhaps these people aren't on our side. And that is a really dangerous place to put things.
Sir Charles Walker, thank you. Very thorough stuff. I can still hear the anger. I can hear the passion in what you're articulating here. And I can also hear a lot of support out there for that position, even allowing for the understanding of, what is happening. Protest? How big a protest? Do you have to say, well, okay, you can have a protest. You have to go through the rigmarole of getting it checked by the authorities. Once you've got that, I think you can still protest. Does that not already address it? I'd love your response on what you just heard there. That really was top drawer in terms of passion and anger from a sitting member of the British Parliament.